Hi, everybody. This is a short PowerPoint on conclusions and then using semicolons, colons, and dashes to add in more of your voice. It works the same way as varying sentence length to add some more voice. This helps you vary the construction of the sentences so the rhythms change. And when we hear different rhythms, it's easier to re-engage and keep receiving the message. So let's take a look at some of these things. Sometimes my button gets stuck. There we go. So let's start with semicolons, colons, and dashes. Semicolons are the matchmakers of the grammar world. They can be used two ways. They can separate really complex elements in a list so that you just don't have a string of commas that gets confusing. And then they can work on either side of what's called an independent clause. And independent clauses are just complete sentences, but they link those two ideas together. So this semicolon is teaching you something. It's teaching you how to receive this sentence, how to create meaning from it. And if you think about how silence works in music, you can use it for effect, because if you have silence on either side of a note, that gives emphasis to that note. And these grammatical ideas are working the same way. They're providing you an opportunity to inject a bit of silence on either side of a word so that that word is emphasized or suppressed a little bit. Like if you were going to use parentheses, it's like you're whispering something to someone. Now, colons are the butlers of the grammatical world. Colons introduce ideas. So if you're an idea, you're walking up the steps to the castle, you have a butler or someone who is going to introduce you to the inhabitants of that castle, and they will call out your name at the top of the stairs, and everyone in the audience below can receive you that way. So this colon is an indicator that you should pay attention to what's going to come after it. Now, dashes are like the extroverted version of parentheses. They call attention to something. So whereas when you use parentheses, you're kind of setting it off to the side or you're whispering it. When you use dashes to draw attention to something, you're loudly exclaiming it, so people pay attention to you. And I'll give you some examples here. Okay, so you all know by now that I have 9 cats. I'm going to give you a list of my cats' names, and I want you to tell me which one sounds more human. Because remember, we're trying to convey our humanness so that we don't sound like everybody else, because most people's writing sounds just like everybody else's. It's the lazy way to write. We want our ideas to stand out, so we need to get our personality in there somehow. And here's a way to do it. So the first example, I have 9 cats. Their names are Ira, Campbell, Random, Pixel, Ingrid, Gretchen, Yuki, Jinx, and Wolfie. They are gorgeous. I love them. Okay, cool. Next example, which one has more personality? I have 9 cats. Ira and Campbell came together, and Ira's my husband's cat, hands down. Random and Pixel are drooly brothers. They drool when they purr, and Ingrid is the mama of the last 4. Of those 4, Gretchen and Yuki are my favorite tuxedo kittens, but Yuki, the most beautiful one, in my opinion, spends most of her time at the neighbor's farm because she's in love with their cat. But of course, I love every single one of them. And then there are the chickens, the blacks and white ones. They're the friendliest. I also love the Rhode Island Reds, despite their bad behavior. Okay, right? You get the idea. Now let's figure out why these work. Okay, why that second one works. So here I have the butler introducing the fact that I have 9 cats, colon, we're anticipating this list of 9 cats' names. We're getting excited about this, right? That anticipation helps inject some personality in there. So after that colon, you're going to see the list. Here's Ira and Campbell who came together, and Ira's my husband's cat, hands down. Now that's a pretty complex description. So I'm going to separate the next item in the list with a semicolon. because otherwise I'd be having a lot of commas and periods everywhere. We just want this list to run smoothly. It has to be accessible. So we'll separate these complex elements with semicolons. So the next grouping is Random and Pixel, a drooly brothers. And then I'm going to whisper, they drool when they purr. And there should be a parenthesis there to separate the next element of the list, which is when I start talking about Ingrid. And Ingrid is the mama of the last four. New sentence, of those four, Gretchen and Yuki are my tuxedo kittens. But Yuki, and here's where I'm going to shout it out with a dash, the most beautiful one, in my opinion. And you can hear how in my opinion, which is in parentheses, is quieter or whispered. But the most beautiful one is loud. And look at the space that surrounds that. That space is created by typing two dashes together and putting no spaces on either side of the letters. Right? That's how you get that M dash. So the physical space here draws our attention to that exclamation that she's the most beautiful one. And you can hear it too because there's silence. So of those four, Gretchen and Yuki are my tuxedo kittens, but Yuki, silence, the most beautiful one, in my opinion, silence, spends most of her time at the neighbor's farm because she's in love with their cat. The black and white ones are the friendliest. Oh, here's another usage of the semicolon. And this is the one where it's working as the matchmaker, where it's joining two ideas together. The stuff after the semicolon is going to explain it just a little bit more. I also love the Rhode Island Reds despite their bad behavior. So this is about behavior. The blacks and white ones are the friendliest. Semicolon, anticipating what's coming up next. It's pretty exciting because we're going to hear about the Rhode Island Reds and their bad behavior, right? It extends the logic there. On both sides, each side could stand alone as their very own sentence. The black and white ones are the friendliest, period. I also love the Rhode Island Reds despite their bad behavior, period. Two complete sentences on either side. They have to be complete sentences unless they're being used to separate elements in a complex list. But you can hear how the rhythms change with the different kinds of punctuation you use. So semicolons have just a bit shorter of a pause than you would with a period. A comma is shorter still. When you use the parentheses, you lower the volume and you maybe speak a little bit slower. When you use the M dashes, you raise the volume and you shout it out. This conveys all kinds of emotions. And so when we've been talking so far about varying the sentence length, now I want you to start varying the sentence construction as well, because that changes up the rhythm and we get more of your personality then in your writing. The last thing that we still need to talk about, as it happens, is conclusions. So you've probably been taught to just restate the main idea of the conclusion. That's a good place to start. Now let's take it a step further. State it in a different way and then change the tense. We're working with audiences. We're not writing this in isolation. It's going to have an impact on an audience. And if you want an audience to remember what you're talking about, in your conclusion, change to the future tense and show them what they can do with your ideas. Where could your ideas go next? What's the next step in the process? If you give somebody something to do, like if you hand them a piece of paper when you're giving a speech, or you direct their attention to a certain website, if they take that action up, they'll be remembering your ideas even after you have finished talking or they have finished reading what you have written. And that's the goal, is to get an audience to receive your message. So here are some examples, and I'm going to move this out of the way so I can see. Okay. Women have outnumbered men on the payroll in non-farm jobs since 2010. But even with a majority of females in the office, there are still huge challenges for them at work. One of the biggest issues, which has been widely covered and debated on, is the fact that women still earn less of a wage for the same job as their male counterparts. Now that women are the breadwinners of many families, this is stunting economic growth and opportunity for their children. Additionally, women are less likely to be in charge at work. With less than 6% of Fortune 500 companies with a female CEO, women have a steeper hill to climb at the very top echelon of jobs. With a more level playing field, women's opportunities will increase and the workforce will ultimately be more inviting for all. And you can see that they are focusing on the future. With less than 6% of Fortune 500 companies with a female CEO, women are going to have in the future and now a steeper hill to climb at the very top echelon of their jobs. Let's take a look at the next example, if I can make it advance. Financial literacy is one of the most important things a person needs to understand as a fully functional adult. It's crucial for someone to be able to know how to purchase a car, open a bank account, invest in a 401k plan, and pay back his or her student debt, all while being able to balance paying rent and saving money. Financial literacy should be taught to students while they are still in high school. So here's the future orientation, so that they can feel prepared to go out on their own and make a positive contribution to society. So why should they do this? So they can do these things. Focus on that doing part as well. And here's one more example, if I can read it. Here we go. Video games have been an integral part of childhood and adolescence for a few decades now, but the effects on aggression levels and exposure to violence may make us take pause on how much exposure parents should let their kids have to these games. The video game industry is growing exponentially, and as the technology and video quality increase, so does the ability to separate virtual reality from reality. Games with violent content are known to cause aggressive and sometimes even violent behavior in teens. Many video games, first-person shooter games in particular, have violent content. When the player is rewarded for violent behavior in the game, it reinforces the subtle idea that violence is acceptable and can be used in real life. With busy schedules and easy access to so much media, it's difficult for parents to be able to oversee everything their children are exposed to. Video game designers should be held accountable, and here's both the action and the future orientation. Video game designers should be held accountable for the violent content in their games, and a push should be made for more parental oversight and rules on video game usage. So as you're working on your essays, try and incorporate these different sentence structures and really think about your conclusion and how you can turn it to the future and focus on action. Thanks, everybody.